I did a presentation last fall on anxiety, and I did a lot of talking about what anxiety is and why we have it. I did do some coping skills at the end, but as I said, I'm a talker, so I didn't get to a lot of it and didn't really get in depth. As a therapist, a lot of what I do is teach people how to cope with things in their day-to-day lives. So anxiety being the #1 most prevalent mental illness in the United States is something I talk about a lot. So luckily I know a lot about it. All right, so let's get into it. So what is anxiety? Anxiety is really normal. We all have anxiety in normal situations such as public speaking, such as getting a new job, moving, trying to make a difficult decision. So it really is fear, stress, worry, typically about life events. Sometimes anxiety can happen without any trigger. We oftentimes will have a trigger, but it actually does happen when there's no trigger at all. So oftentimes people are wondering, why do I have anxiety? Why do I have anxiety? What's going on? What is the reason for this? And I'll tell you that there are absolutely some times where there is no reason. Your body just kind of says, guess what? I'm going to turn on the fight or flight, and I'm going to give you anxiety. Okay, so fun, right? So it is something that it does help us get ready for danger. If you think, thousands and thousands of years ago, have early man on the plains, and he's doing something, and he hears something. He's got to look up and look around, right, and make sure that there is no predator that's going to come and eat him, right? He's also maybe looking up and looking around for maybe something he can kill and eat. So it does have a purpose, a function. It's fight or flight, right? Fight or flight. So it really is to get our body prepared to fight off or to run. And so the reason that we have these symptoms is to get ourselves prepared for that. Once the danger passes, the anxiety subsides. Our brain, our fight or flight kind of turns off, goes back into rest and digest mode, and we feel calmer. Heart rate slows down, our blood pressure slows down, our digestion turns back on, and we feel kind of okay. Right? But we constantly have to kind of look around for danger. Now, our society evolved and our environment evolved much faster than our brains were able to, and so we have this residual, and it's still very purposeful, reason that we have anxiety, but we don't have the same reasons that anxiety happens. We have more imaginary lions than actual lions. Okay? So symptoms, obviously, restlessness, wound up, on edge, kind of feeling like you need to move. Easily fatigued. So if our body is chronically turned on, ready to fight, that is really fatiguing. We feel really tired, even though we're kind of wound up. So you kind of have both of them, which is a really odd mixture. We get irritable. We have difficulty concentrating because we're constantly having to look around for things, right? Is there danger? Is there danger? Difficulty controlling worry. We have racing thoughts. We kind of need, our brains need to kind of focus on many different things for survival, but not necessarily anymore. We have sleep problems. We can't sleep. We wake up a lot. We wake up and we stay up for a long time. Oftentimes, when we're going to sleep, or when we wake up in the middle of the night, that's the time we have racing thoughts, right? And a lot of people that say, my mind races when I'm trying to go to sleep. Well, that's a really normal occurrence, and generally happens because we've got nothing to distract ourselves at that time of night. Right? Versus during the day, we have a lot going on, we have a lot to distract ourselves, so we can distract from our thoughts going really fast. Social isolation. This is kind of a symptom. It's kind of a part of what tends to happen because we tend to start avoiding things that cause us anxiety. Because anxiety is so uncomfortable to us that we think, well, I don't want to feel that way, so the way I don't feel that way is by avoiding anxiety. And there's some amount of avoidance that is okay. But when it becomes too much avoidance, anything in large quantities, in large amounts, is generally unhealthy. Okay? All right, so there's a cycle of anxiety. So there's a trigger. Something happens. It can be a loud noise. It can be, I have to do a presentation at work. It can be a thought. It can be a trigger. There doesn't always have to be a trigger, though, mind you. Sometimes the trigger is the physical sensation or the thought. So when we have a trigger, it triggers the cycle. And this is a very quick cycle that we tend to stay in and snowball in. So we have a lot of thoughts. I'm going crazy. I'm in danger. I can't do this. Oh my God. Right? We also have physical sensations. So again, those cold cold hands and feet, shaking, fast, shallow breathing, butterflies in your stomach, tight chest. We have anxious behavior, so we run away, we avoid, we maybe use drugs or alcohol, because drugs and alcohol tend to dampen down the fight or flight system, and so it does make us feel better, but in the short term, because it does have long-term effects, obviously, for using drugs and alcohol often and too much. Sometimes people engage in checking behaviors or more OCD type behaviors. You know, that if I make sure everything is straight, it makes me feel better. Okay? So there can be really negative effects to anxiety. We tend to then go back into thoughts, right? I'm not good enough because I couldn't go to my presentation. I called in sick. So I'm not good enough, and then I get more anxious, often depressed, because I usually say depression and anxiety are best friends. One doesn't go without the other, oftentimes. So we get more physical sensations, more anxious behaviors, more avoidance, more negative thoughts, right? And we kind of stay in this cycle. So treatment for anxiety. So the good news is, you know, there's help. Absolutely. Self-help books. Learning on your own how to manage your thoughts, manage your symptoms, manage your avoidance behaviors. There's a really good book, Anxiety and Phobia Workbook, that I do utilize a lot. I utilize the handouts for patients, and it teaches you a lot of very similar things as to what I'm going to go over today. And it's cognitive behavioral therapy based, so it's cognitive behavior therapy, so using changing the mind, changing the behavior to change the emotion. Okay? Medication. Medications help with chemical changes in our body. Well, when anxiety happens, chemical changes occur in our body, remember, to get us ready to run or to fight. And so when that's chronically happening to us, and in times that we can't really control it, we don't really want it, medications can be helpful. Pills don't teach skills, though. So another support is psychotherapy. So utilizing a counselor, a therapist, a life coach to learn more in-depth coping skills. To talk about some of the things that cause you anxiety, to talk about the effects of your anxiety. You know, that can be really important, is being able to talk about it, but also knowing what to do about it is very important, because we all want to be able to cope in our daily lives much better than we're able to sometimes. And so that's where coping skills can really come along, and obviously that's why you're here, is you want to learn more about those coping skills. Give me the coping skills. So I utilize coping skills all the time. I am no better than anybody that comes in to see me. You know, I know the power of them personally, and so I very much do utilize them in my own life. Okay? So they're really effective, and the most effective is the combination of all three. So if anxiety becomes too much and your ability to function in your day-to-day life is affected, going to see a counselor, going to see a therapist, going to see a primary care physician, and utilizing at-home techniques. All right, so when should you seek professional help? Well, since anxiety is normal, it's going to happen, and it's good to know coping skills even if you don't have an anxiety disorder, right? But when it starts to impact your functioning at work, at home, your ability to do things, your relationships, that's the time to seek professional help. Right? Whether that be your primary care physician, whether that be a psychiatrist or mental health professional, counselor, or whether that be support groups. There's another important support, is support groups, which are sometimes led by professionals, sometimes led by peers, because it's a group of people that have common interests for coming together. Depression, anxiety, bereavement, things like that. Okay. Coping skills. So I'm going to go through a lot of very common coping skills, and they fall into a few categories: thinking, doing, feeling. These strategies are not going to work for everybody every time. You know, I often hear, well, I tried breathing and it helped a little bit, it really didn't help that much. You know, and what I say is, if it helps even a little bit, that's great. Now you will probably need to utilize a few different coping skills kind of in a short time frame. Okay, so there's some like breathing techniques that are sort of very much in the moment coping skills when you're feeling the anxiety get really, really big. And so it can be really effective. You can do it anywhere, you can take it anywhere, it doesn't require anything special. And there's other coping skills that are maybe ones that you'll want to do, you know, pretty frequently, here and there. And I'll talk about why certain coping skills, you know, such as making art, is a really healthy coping skill and can be really good, and what it is to that can help you utilize it as a coping skill and not just a fun thing to do. Okay? All right, so it's important to remember that all emotions are temporary. Okay? You've never felt one emotion for your whole life. And if you have, please come and see me. I want to study you. Okay? Because the intensity and the time, it peaks and it recedes. Now, at this peak, or getting near this peak, guess what? We feel like this is never going to go away. When will this end? I want this to stop now. Right? And we feel it so intensely. It can be so uncomfortable that it does feel like it's just going to last forever, but it doesn't. And that's something to remember is all emotions are temporary. They're like waves. They peak and they recede. That's often something I talk about with patients a lot is it's your wave. Your wave will pass, right? Now something to remember too is, anybody ever been to the beach with some nice big waves? I used to live in Massachusetts, so I had decent sized waves. Have you ever tried to stop a wave? Right? What happens? Right? It pushes you right over, and you get sand up your nose, and in places you don't want to talk about, and it's really uncomfortable if you try to stop it. Well, that's what happens when we try to stop anxiety, right? What happens though when we see the wave coming and we're able to say, all right, I'm just going to ride with it. I'm going to go with it. I don't like it always, but I'm going to go with it. What happens? What changes? It's more comfortable. We tend to stay on top of it. It doesn't totally push us over, right? So that's something that we need to do with anxieties. We need to recognize that we're not going to be able to just stop it in the moment. That we've got to ride with it a little bit, right? And we'll certainly talk about acceptance, which is a very hard thing to do. So acceptance is not resisting anxiety, but rather it is accepting that the emotion is there. It's uncomfortable. We've got to acknowledge that. We're not going to say, I love anxiety. But that we're doing the best we can to cope with it, and that it will go away. Right? Now, when you practice acceptance, you're still disappointed, sad, fearful, but you don't add to the pain of not accepting. Right? It's riding with the wave instead of trying to force it to stop, and it pushes you over. The Serenity Prayer is fantastic, and it's oftentimes used in AA and NA, but it can be utilized at any moment. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Oftentimes, distress comes when we try to change the things we cannot change, and when we accept things that we can change, and we let it be, when maybe we should change it. And so it's really important to recognize if there's something that I can do about what's causing anxiety or about something in my life, and it's a healthy thing to do, let me try it, let me do it. And if I can't do anything, I've got to accept that it's there, even if it's uncomfortable. Okay? Now acceptance does take a lot of practice, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of talking about, can I change this, do I have any control over this? So it is a very, very hard thing to do. And it's definitely something I talk a lot about with patients over and over, because it's not an overnight process. Okay? Now, when we're looking at things that we can control, we can ultimately only really affect 3 things in our life. We don't always have 100% control over them, but we have some semblance of control over them. 3 things are what I think about, so they're my thoughts, what I think about, how I think about things. So I can decide to think about a white elephant, or cupcake, right? Or what I'm going to do tomorrow. Or I can think about being here in this moment, recognize where my body is and how I'm feeling. So what I think about, how I think about things. I can't do this. Or I'm just going to go there and do the best I can. It may be uncomfortable. So if the situation doesn't change, what I think about and how I think about it can. We can control our actions and reactions. I can control whether I throw my phone at the wall or whether I say, put it down and walk away from whoever's texting me and annoying me. I can control what I do. I control what I say, how I say it, right? Or, this bothers me. I can control whether to change whether to avoid, whether to try. And by changing the thoughts and the emotions, I can try and oftentimes will affect the emotion. With the thoughts and the behaviors, I affect the emotion. Okay? Now, oftentimes people say, I don't have control over what I do. I don't have control over what I think. I don't have control over how I feel. But that's what learning coping skills, and that's what I do a lot in psychotherapy, is teaching people how to slow the process down, recognize that we do have some semblance of control over that, and how to gain a little bit of control. No, we don't ultimately have control, and that's hard. It is what it is. It's okay. We're still coping. The things that we don't have control over, obviously, other people's emotions, thoughts, behaviors. I can't make anybody do anything. I can't make anybody think anything, and I can't make anybody feel anything. I can try to persuade. I can say, can you please do this for me? And I can ask. That's part of what I can do. I can communicate. But I can't ultimately control whether that person does that thing for me or not. Okay? Which is a very hard thing to do, because usually that's part of what we want to do, is we want to control other people. We cannot control certain situations from happening, and we cannot control the weather, such as a couple Wednesdays ago when it snowed a whole bunch on us. So yeah, that's a hard one sometimes for us, especially here in Wisconsin. We've got lovely weather. So something that is important that we can control and that we can change is our self-talk, what we say to ourselves. I can't do this. I'm going to fail. I'm so nervous. What we say to something really does affect how we feel about it. I can't do this. I'm going to be less motivated to try if I say I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. Versus, it's going to be hard and I'm going to do my best and I'm just going to try. You know, try. That's a great thing to say, is I'm just going to try. Right? Our negative perceptions, our what if thinking tends to lead to anxiety and depression. A lot of our coulda, shoulda, wouldas, thinking of the past. I should have done this, I should have done that. I like to say, don't should on yourself. It doesn't sound like that because it's uncomfortable, right? Nobody really wants to do that. So check your shoulds. Are you shoulding on yourself? Yeah. Every once in a while, like 1% of the time, a should is okay. But most of the time, if you're saying should or I coulda, you're probably thinking very negatively and you're placing more blame on yourself than you need to. And especially when it's thinking about the past, it's recognizing that you can learn from the past, and that's the best thing that you can do from it. But thinking about how inadequate you are because of something that happened that you have no control over now, because that's another thing we have no control over, is the past, isn't going to help you move forward. So learning from that situation. I'm going to try next time to do this, to do it that way. Not, I'm so stupid, I can't do it, I didn't do it well. Next time I'm going to try this. Okay? Or we can even learn that, gosh, it was a really hard situation, and I'm stronger than I thought because I got through it. I got through it. Okay? Now, what's important is our anxious self-talk is typically irrational. There's typically some sort of, quite a bit of untruth in it. And these are sometimes what are called cognitive distortions. And it doesn't mean that you have distorted thoughts. It just means that's our therapy speak for what we say, and we categorize them into certain ones. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of them. I'm going to go through a little bit, but I would certainly say if some of these are ringing true, look them up a little bit, because they're really, really common cognitive distortions that we all engage in. Recognizing them will help you challenge and then replace. Okay? So all or nothing thinking, sometimes called black or white thinking, we fall into this one a lot. I'm either perfect, I do it 100% perfect, or I failed. Right? That's something that we very much do. She's either my friend or my enemy. Oftentimes it's better to try to live in shades of gray, try to balance out. You know, that's what life tends to be about, is finding a balance, because we shouldn't be living in extremes. They're uncomfortable places to be. Living in the middle or finding a balance is more comfortable. Overgeneralization. So this is saying that there's an overall pattern. I got a bad grade, so I'm going to fail the whole class. Mental filter. So focus on the negative. So, you know, I was driving to work and I was up really early and I was getting my coffee and it was great, and I blew a flat tire and My day is shot. It's terrible. It's the worst day ever, even though I went on that day to have, make a great presentation or to get a really good review at work. My day was terrible because this one thing happened, and I don't care about the rest of it. Disqualifying the positive is another type of mental filter that we often do simultaneously, so it doesn't matter that I got a great review at work. I blew my tire and it cost me $150. Ah! Jumping to conclusions. So there's a couple of these. Mind reading. Thinking we know what other people think. Well, they think this about me. Question. Does anybody know what I'm thinking right now? No. Blue bunny ice cream. We had Sundays upstairs and I missed out. I know. So ice cream's on my mind. So we don't know what other people are thinking. So recognize if you are thinking about what other people think of you. This is common in social anxiety. They think I'm this. They think I'm stupid. They think I'm dumb. They think my clothes are terrible. Do you know that? You only know what somebody's thinking when they tell you what they're thinking. So recognize when you're maybe thinking, putting thoughts in somebody else's mind. Okay? Fortune telling. I'm going to fail. I'm going to this. I'm going to the... He's going to hate me. Who's got a crystal ball? Who can read the future? No? Okay. Yeah. Nobody. So recognize that when we're reading the future, when I actually don't know. It's a possibility that I could fail. It's a possibility that they don't like me. But there's these other possibilities. Magnification, catastrophizing. The worst thing ever. Oh my God, it was terrible. Minimizing importance of small details or positive things. Emotional reasoning. I feel it, therefore it must be true. Do not believe everything you feel. Do not believe everything you think. We oftentimes fall into that. Well, I feel like it's going to be terrible. But does that mean it's true? No. Should statements. So we talked about that a little bit. Shoulding. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. I don't live up to my own standards if I'm thinking in that way. It can be helpful, but we've got to quickly then change it into I'm going to learn this, or I'm going to try to do this next time. Labeling, mislabeling, we assign judgments. I'm terrible. I'm an idiot. I'm so stupid. Is that 100% true, really? That I did, one thing and I'm an idiot? I got a C on a test and I'm the worst thing ever. No, labeling. Harshly judging. Personalization. My husband's mad. What did I do? It's my fault. I don't know what I did, but I know it's my fault. I know I did it. No, that we tend to do that quite often, especially in anxiety, because anxiety we tend to feel like everything is because of us. Control fallacies. We either believe that we have no control at all over anything, which is really anxiety-provoking, or we believe that we have control over everything. And when we don't have control on many things, we get anxious about it. Okay? And so again, this is another time where we try to balance out. Yes, I have control over some things. I have control over how I think, how I act, and how I feel. I don't have control over other things. Anybody else? The weather. So countering negative self-talk. It's a really important skill. So I've been talking a little bit about ways to challenge it while I was talking about some of those thought distortions. What's the evidence for this? What's the evidence on the contrary for the opposite of this? Is this always true? Is this 100% true? Sometimes I'll even ask my patients, what's the percentage that you believe this is true? And they'll say, 75. And I'll say 25% is possibly not what you think is right. There's some possibilities. And then we'll talk about what that 25% is. And sometimes we'll talk about what that negative is, and we'll really go along that path of, okay, but if that happens, can you cope with it? Is it so bad? No, it's actually not so bad. Now, how true do you think this is now? That number almost always goes down, except for those really resistant patients that are like, no, it's 75%. But it's neither here nor there. What is the worst that can happen? Like I said, what's so bad about that? Can I cope with that? How will I cope with that? Having a cope-ahead plan, like I said, walking down that path of that negative thought or assumption. We oftentimes, once we can do that and really kind of pull back the wool on it and see the reality of it, and say, yeah, I can probably cope with that. I probably can figure out how to deal with that, and this is how I want to do that. It actually helps our anxiety come down a little bit, right? I don't really want to go out. I don't want to go and do this presentation. Oh my God, it's going to be the worst thing ever. I'm going to fumble. I'm going to screw up my words. My slides aren't going to work. What would I do? Well, I printed out slides just in case, right? I self-talk that, hey, if I screw up on a word, that's okay. Everybody does. Not everybody can do presentations. And people are probably going to be giving me a pass if I mess up here or there. Are you looking at the whole picture? Are you only looking at one particular part of something? Are there other ways of looking at it? So a lot of this I focused on so far is a lot of the mind. The power of our thoughts is really important because it's kind of where a lot of our stuff comes from. No, I really don't want to go. I'm going to be so anxious if I go to this thing, if I go out to this party. Everybody's going to be looking at me. Everybody's going to be judging me. I just don't know. I'm going to be so anxious. I don't know if I'm not going to be able to cope. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to avoid. I'm going to say nope. I'm going to text my friend and say I'm sick, or Junior is not feeling well today. So I get out of it, and then I don't go. What my mind learns then from avoiding is that the way to get rid of anxiety is to avoid it. And so then I tend to do more avoidance. Okay? So on the contrary to that, when you actually go and do something that is anxiety-provoking, recognize for yourself, well, that wasn't so bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Right? That was maybe a little anxiety-provoking, but I did it. I got through it. And in that way, you kind of are going to be reducing the amount of anxiety that you're going to have in the long term. So if you continue to approach some of your anxiety-provoking situations, certainly not like feeding alligators if you have a deathly fear of alligators, but going to that party, right? All right. Positive self-talk and affirmation. So positive, we're encouraging self-talk. So as you start to do positive self-talk, it will start to automatically occur. So our brains are kind of like woods, really dense woods, and there's paths in the woods of our brains. And we've forged these over our whole lives. And so we have these paths that we go down very, very easily because we've been walking down it for, quite a number of years. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but, for a long time I've been walking down the same path. If I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. Right? So I can run down that path. And that's how our brains work, is it runs down that path, that automatic thought, before I can even stop it sometimes. Now, as I start to build a new path, anybody that's tried to build a new path in the woods, what happens? First time you try to build that new path, is it easy? No, it's very hard. You've got to get the vegetation back, you kind of got to stamp it down, you got to move a boulder. Second time you go down that path, is it easy? No, it's still very hard. Maybe a little bit easier. Third time, fourth time, 20th time, 100th time, you go down that path, it starts to become easier. You start to see the way, right? And as you use that old path, that old train of thought less, what happens? Vegetation grows over. It becomes less and less enticing to go down. So over time, if we repeat our identification of our negative thoughts, challenge and replace them, if we do positive self-talk, it'll become more automatic. It's a habit. Habits can be changed, right? So examples of positive self-talk are not like, I'm the best person ever. That's way too positive. Come on, who talks like that? What it is more neutral, realistic thinking and self-talk, okay? I'm going to be all right. My feelings are not always rational. I'm just going to try to relax, calm down, use my coping skills. Everything's going to be okay. I've done this before. I know I can do it again. It's okay to feel anxiety right now. This wave will pass. So we do some more of just rationalize and neutral self-talk. Okay? So mindfulness. Anybody heard of mindfulness before? It's a very big buzzword. So mindfulness is really important. I talk about it a lot. It's something that, again, should be practiced quite a bit and doesn't have to take a long time, doesn't have to be, even for 10 minutes. What it is basically giving our attention to the present moment on purpose without judgment. Okay? So we get to decide what we focus on. Remember, that's changing my thoughts, what I think about. So my attention is on something in the present moment. So it's not on what I did last week. It's not on what I need to do tonight. It's on this moment right now. On purpose, so I'm deciding to do that without judgment. It's not that I'm dumb, it's not that this is stupid, it's not that I can't do this, it just is. Okay? It may feel funny sometimes, but that's okay. Right? We recognize and acknowledge negative, racing thoughts, images, sensations when we're trying to be mindful about things. And really what it is being able to utilize your senses. Okay? So oftentimes, if you try a mindfulness meditation, it'll say focus on your breathing, because it's something that you've always got with you, something we're always doing, and it's something that really can change, that we can change and control to relax ourselves a little more. Okay? So I'm going to go over this a little bit, a little faster, since I am running out of time because I'm a talker. So I would say mindfulness is really important. You can do mindfulness at any time. So breathing is really important. So when we have anxiety, our breathing gets shallow and gets fast. Other sensations or other things that change in our bodies, our blood pressure raises, our heart rate raises, our digestion turns off, our major muscle groups get a lot of energy. What's the one thing we can control in all of that? Our breathing. Okay? Now, when we breathe out, we activate our rest and digest, our calm down part of our sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So when we breathe in, we turn on. Think about somebody who's hyperventilating. They're breathing in more than they're breathing out. Now, when we're anxious, we breathe that way. We breathe in more than we breathe out, or we hold our breath. Okay? So the way to use breathing to calm is to regulate the in-breath with the out-breath, or have slightly longer out-breath than in-breath. Okay? So there's a couple of breathing techniques. So abdominal breathing, this is a great one to practice on a daily basis. So this is a great thing to practice when you're laying in bed or when you're laying down. You put a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly. And you focus on taking a breath in and your belly moving before your chest does. So we're getting the breath down into the diaphragm and the bottom of the lungs, where we tend to not breathe very much, especially if we're sitting. Kind of constricts that. So we utilize more of our lungs instead of this top part of our lung, which we tend to use in anxiety breathing. And then we breathe out, our chest goes in and our belly goes in. Okay? And you relax, you close your eyes, you just focus, using mindfulness, on your breathing. Now, something with mindfulness that's important to recognize: when your thoughts get distracted by whatever, a noise, a thought about, I've got to do this thing today, you gently notice, and bring it back to what it is you want to focus on. So you bring it back to breathing. You can do this for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. If you can only do a minute, okay, great, I'm happy. Doing it all is great. So this is a great practice because it can be helpful to regulate your ability to breathe with the bottom of your lungs, with breathing with deeper breathing. Now, square breathing is a really great breathing technique that a lot of first responders use, so police officers, firefighters, military, and it's really good when this anxiety is really, really big and more panicky, and it's very easy to remember. Okay? So obviously square, and it's the count of 4. Okay? So you breathe in for the count of 4. You hold the breath in for the count of 4, you breathe out for the count of 4, you hold the breath out for the count of 4, and you repeat that square 4 times. So many 4s. One thing to remember with this is your count, especially if you're really anxious, our breathing is really fast. So it doesn't have to be 4 seconds. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So see how I slowed that down? So you start with how your breathing is when you're in that high anxiety, almost panic. Because if you try to go 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to feel like you're hyperventilating and you're going to say, this doesn't work! That lady told me something wrong, oh my God! Okay, so go with your breath and slow it down. Okay, and again, you're using mindfulness to focus on your breathing, on your counting. Okay, when your mind goes off in this thing that's causing anxiety, you bring it back to the breathing, the counting. Okay? Without judgment. You're not doing it wrong. You're doing it just as it needs to be. Okay? Hot chocolate breathing. This is a great breathing for kids, for teens, but also for adults. I talk about it with my patients too because it's really easy to remember again. So this is really just imagining you have a cup of hot chocolate on a cold winter's day, and oh, it smells so good, but it's really, really hot. I've got to cool it down, right? So what you're doing is you're breathing in through your nose, imagining you're smelling the hot chocolate, so you're using this imagery, which is really great. You're breathing out, you're cooling it down, and your mouth is sort of constricting the flow of air, so it's a nice, long, slow out breath. Okay? So it's a really great breathing technique because it's really easy to remember and to practice. Hey, and if you want to practice with actual hot chocolate or tea or coffee or something, go right ahead. I had a teenager once that said, oh, I really like energy drinks. And I said, okay, we'll do hot energy drinks. Sorry. I don't think it would taste very good. But okay. Exercise. Exercise is one of those things that is an important sort of continual coping skill. It's not always going to be helpful when you're in anxiety, but doing some push-ups, doing some jumping jacks when you're anxious can be helpful because once early man got away from what was causing him anxiety or panic, I ran, guess what? My fight or flight said, well, I used that energy and I survived, so I can turn off. So it's a way that we can signal our brain to turn off the fight or flight. Okay? We also utilize excess adrenaline. We reduce muscle tension. And it doesn't have to be really high impact exercise. It can be really low impact exercise. So those of you that maybe have some movement, joint issues, different abilities, yoga and Tai Chi are fantastic. So we all know what yoga is, right? It's doing sun salutations and things like that. It can be really hard if you have really poor balance. Utilize chairs. Tai Chi is just really slow, even movement, so it's really great on the joints. And these both utilize breathing and focusing on the breathing and core strengthening. So utilize a lot of different things that are helpful for reducing anxiety. Right? Anything you can do to get your heart rate up is very helpful, though. It's very healthy, but it's not necessarily needed. Go with your ability. Okay? If you can do even once a week, that's great. It's better than doing nothing. Right? So don't expect yourself to be perfect because perfection does not exist in humans. Right, journaling, writing your stuff out. Talking to other people is really helpful, absolutely, but we don't always have access to other people. So journal your thoughts. This helps us process our thoughts. It helps us get an idea of what it is we're thinking a lot about. It helps us track symptoms. Provides an opportunity for self-talk or recognizing, wow, that thought right there is really negative. I'm terrible. That's not really true. Right? Even better, expressive writing. So this is writing a train of thought, and it doesn't have to have any punctuation, it doesn't have to be legible, okay? You're just writing any thought that comes into your head. This lady told me to write this, and I don't really understand why she told me to do this. This is really stupid, right? I don't care. Write whatever it is. And then you take that piece of paper, rip it out of that notebook, you rip it up, and you throw it away. You actually do that. Okay? The studies have shown that our brain doesn't always know the difference between thinking of something and doing something. And if we actually do that, we throw away those thoughts, guess what? We tend to ruminate less about them. Is it going to make them go away 100%? No. Is it going to make me feel better? Yes. Absolutely. Okay? So it's something to try. Try to get up to 15, 20 minutes if you can. If you can only do 1 or 2 minutes, great. Glad you're doing it at all. Doing something is better than nothing, right? Nutrition. Food is very important. The fuel that we give our body. If you give your car the wrong fuel, is it going to run well? No, it's not. So we've got to get our body very good fuel. So eat a breakfast that has protein in it. If you're eating a high carb, high sugar breakfast, you're setting yourself up for failure. Blood sugar spikes and then drops. And guess what? When we have high blood sugar, how do we feel? Keto. When we have low blood sugar, how do we feel? Oh, God. I don't want to feel that way. So we want to give ourselves protein, which is more sustainable energy. It lasts longer, and there's not these big highs and lows. Make sure you're eating breakfast. If we're not giving ourselves that nutrition in the beginning of the day, we're not able to really process even the medications that we take. Not able to really get ourselves a good start. Complex carbohydrates, that helps with the serotonin production in our brains. Serotonin is actually produced 90% in our guts. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical that helps us with the feeling of well-being. And if we're not producing enough of it because we have bad gut flora, guess what? We're not feeling very well. Okay? So we want to try to do things that help the production of serotonin. So complex carbohydrates, probiotics are really great. So yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, pickles, kombucha. You can also do probiotic supplements. Okay? So listens are really great. They can cause some different side effects. So talk to your doctor if you're going to take a supplement. But hey, having some sauerkraut on, some of your, some pork chops, delicious. Plenty of water. We also want to give ourselves water. When we are dehydrated, we feel anxious because our body says, go get water, I'm going to give you anxiety. Water is very good. Foods to avoid. Artificial refined sugars, obviously. A lot of sugars, a lot of carbs. We want to avoid those as well. Processed foods, there's not good nutrition in there. Limit or avoid caffeine. It's really hard for me to do. Yeah, I understand. So the best you can, and just cutting it down slowly, or maybe it's getting decaf instead of full caffeinated, half calf instead of full caffeinated. Right? Limit or avoid alcohol. So alcohol is a depressant, so it can help us feel better, right? But it depletes our body of serotonin and dopamine. Dopamine is a feel-good chemical, right? And so when we don't have those feel-good chemicals, we don't feel good. So alcohol and drugs deplete our body of that. Something that can also be helpful for anxiety and for the feeling of well-being is being creative, having things to do. When we've got nothing to do, we're just sitting, watching some mindless television, guess where our attention is at? It's not on that TV show very much, it's up here. This is not always a fun place to be, up in our heads, right? So if we give ourselves something to do, something to distract ourselves with, really great, especially in the short term. It's not always going to be a long-term solution that I can, paint for the rest of my life, every moment of the day, but I can at least do it for a few minutes, half an hour, couple hours. So making art is a really great thing. I'm pro-art. I'm a trained art therapist, so I think it's a fantastic way to process our thoughts and emotions. You can draw, paint, collage, sculpt, right? You can woodwork, you can craft, knitting, crocheting. Huge upsurge in knitting or crocheting recently, right? Because it gives us something to do. We're moving, we're focusing, and we're producing something that feels great. Oh, I knitted my son a hat. I feel good about that. Right? Needlepoint, scrapbook, paper craft. Pinterest is a fantastic thing to give you ideas. Doing DIY activities. Right? So not only is it going to help you focus on something in that moment, you're going to produce something that you can feel good about. And if it's not so good, check it out, try again. Right? And I'll often have people say, I can't do art, I can't draw a straight line. That's why they make rulers. And they say, oh, I have no talent. Yeah, guess what? People go practice and practice and practice. And that's how you get good at things. It's a skill just like anything else. So if you say, I'm not very artistic, I cringe when people say that because everybody has creativity. It's just finding what works for you. Maybe it's cooking, trying new foods, new combinations, right? Play a musical instrument. Learn a musical instrument. I passively try to teach myself ukulele. Not very good, but it gives me something to do occasionally and something to practice, and it makes me feel kind of nice. Listen to music. Sing. This is fantastic. In our cars, we sing. Now, what we're doing when we're singing, which is really great, is we are activating, we're stimulating our vagus nerve, which is one of the biggest nerves in our body, and it helps control our nervous system in that it controls our rest and digest. So when we sing, it helps us stimulate that, helps us feel better. Anybody ever feel really good after you sing that song that's like your jam? Yeah, good stuff. Let's see, what else? I'm getting towards the end, which I think is okay. We can have time for questions. So along the lines of being creative, what I have in front of you today is the Say It Out Loud contest. So every May, and May is Mental Health Month, we do a contest at SBS called Say It Out Loud. So we want people to make art, any form of art, so it can be visual, it can be poems, it can be expressive writing, it could be digital media, it can be anything. It does have to include Say It Out Loud somewhere in it, right? But it really is trying to become more aware of the prevalence of mental illness and that there's nothing to be ashamed of it. So it's something that we hold a contest. It's from May 1st to May 31st, so we accept artwork all the way up to 4 p.m. on the 31st. You can run in, Mary, I've got it. Right? And she'll say, okay, good, just in time. And submit that. Now, there is a prize. First place gets $100. Sweet. Second place, $50. Third place gets $25. And you'll also get the satisfaction that you did something fun and creative. Okay? So shameless plug for our contest. Let's see, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about with that. So, that's that. Those are the coping skills I have for you. There are other coping skills. And so certainly the internet has a wealth of information about coping skills. Your local counselor has a wealth of coping skills as well. Utilizing friends that maybe they say, well, this is what I do, can always be a great thing.